A Boilermaker is a beer served with a shot of whiskey. But what if the beer and the whiskey were inextricably linked right from the start of the production process? Today I'm going to review the ultimate Australian Boilermaker. Hey guys, I'm Nath Martyn, the Whisky Scribe. I'm a whisky enthusiast and I love all things whisky. But taste is subjective and there's a lot of different whiskies out there. So whether you consider yourself a connoisseur or you're just looking to understand more about whiskey, let's explore it all together. If you haven't already subscribed, hit that button now. I put up regular whiskey review videos as well as some special interest whiskey pieces. Cape Byron Distillery recently sent me a bottle of their Stone Beer Cask Whisky. Now, for those of you who don't know about Cape Byron Distillery, it was co-founded with Jim McEwen, who might sound familiar from the book Godox history, you know, the Octomore series whiskies, and he also had a really long tenure at Bowmore Distillery. But Cape Byron Distillery is also known for producing Brookie's gin, which is, as far as gins go, absolutely fantastic. The Stone Beer Cask is a single malt that's been aged in ex-bourbon barrels and then finished in barrels that held Stone & Wood's Stone Beer. Now, this is a dark porter beer that was made using hot stones to sort of honour the traditional beer making practices. But it goes a lot further than that. Now, the process of making whiskey, the first stage is basically to make a beer, which they, in distilling terms, they call a wash. That wash is then distilled to make a spirit, and then the spirit is put into barrels and aged to make whiskey. Cape Byron Distillery don't yet have the facilities to make their own wash, and because Stone & Wood Brewery is just down the road from them, like a 10-minute drive, Stone & Wood Brewery makes their wash, which gets sent to the Cape Byron Distillery. So this is where you start to see this whole cycle happen. So Stone & Wood Brewery made the wash, sent it to Cape Byron Distillery, which they then distilled, put into ex-bourbon barrels to make a whiskey. When that whiskey was ready to be bottled, they pulled it out of those ex-bourbon barrels and they sent those barrels to Stone & Wood Brewery. Stone & Wood Brewery then aged their stone beer for 12 months in these ex-Cape Byron barrels, after which they then bottled that beer and then sent the barrels back to Cape Byron Distillery. Stay with me. And then Cape Byron Distillery has taken another batch of whiskey that's been aging in ex-bourbon barrels and then finished that whiskey in these barrels that previously held the dark porter beer. So basically Cape Byron has taken barrels that they've aged their whiskey and sent it to Stone & Wood Brewery. Stone & Wood put this beer into those barrels to finish for 12 months and then sent the empty barrels back to Cape Byron, which they then popped their whiskey into to finish in those beer barrels that previously held Cape Byron whiskey, that even previously held bourbon, which when you think about a Boilermaker cocktail originated in America. So it's come full circle. So I don't feel like there's any better combination of beer and whiskey to try together. But what is a Boilermaker? So traditionally, a Boilermaker is sort of considered a cocktail. It's essentially serving a shot of American whiskey with a glass of beer. And depending on where you order it, depending on which city you're in, well, they may, drop the shot of whiskey into the beer, they may pour the whiskey into the beer, they may shoot the whiskey and then drink the beer. Anyway, it supposedly originated in the 1800s amongst factory workers who were the boilermakers for locomotives at the time. Hence the name the Boilermaker. They had a really long, hard day at work, they needed a really stiff drink, and just a glass of beer wouldn't cut it. But these days, the Boilermaker has become popular amongst whiskey drinkers to essentially pair a whiskey and a beer where the flavors are going to complement each other. So you're not shooting one down, you're sort of sipping the whiskey and then sipping the beer and going back and forth, almost the way you might actually pair like a whiskey with a cigar. A puff on the cigar brings out some flavors, a drink of the whiskey brings out others, and you go back and forth and see how it develops. So the Stone & Wood Stone beer was, as I said, it was made with hot stones to honour sort of the traditional beer making practices, and then it's been aged for 12 months in those Cape Byron barrels. It's bottled at 11.9%. So this 500ml bottle has got 4.7 standard drinks in it. But as you can see, beautiful dark porter beer. This thing is black as the night. Not like all at once. You can have some too. It's got some really nice chocolatey sort of notes in here. You got sort of coffee, and it's really sort of, it's sweet sort of earthy flavors, notes on the nose. It smells good. Slange. Really strong flavors. Definitely getting the alcohol that's coming across. But yeah, that sort of coffee and chocolatey sort of notes on the nose, they definitely come across in the palate. Really, it's thick and it's sitting somewhere between like a buttery and a syrupy sort of texture. That is a full-bodied beer. Like, really, it's. Oof. I'll tell you what, for a traditional Boilermaker, you wouldn't need to add whiskey to that. Yeah, there's so much flavor in that. The tasting notes that they give you from the website, the first thing they say is full flavored, okay? I'm right on point there. Roasted coffee, yes. Dark chocolate, yes. Light smoke from macadamia. They are just up the road from Cape Byron that grows macadamia trees. There is a nutty texture, you could almost call it macadamia. Yeah, I suppose that does come across as a little bit smoky. That's lovely, I'm really going to enjoy that. Did you want to try?
It's like drinking just straight cordial.
Like if dark beer was made in a cordial. Yeah.
Like you're just drinking a dark beer cordial.
Yeah, that's probably a good reference. If you're not used to it, this probably comes across almost as though like the beer concentrate that you're meant to add water to. In fact, if you mix it 50-50 with water, it'd be the strength of a normal beer. It'd still be stronger than a normal beer. That's stunning, but I'm not going to drink too much of that before I get a chance to try the whiskey.
Yeah, I'm buzzing over them.
Yeah, I know, right? The tingling hits you almost straight away. It's like, man, seriously, this is like, it's like they made a Boilermaker from the start. The Cape Byron Stone Beer Cask, it's a non-age statement whiskey, but we do know from history with Cape Byron that although in Australia you can call a whiskey if it's only spent 2 years in barrels, whereas in Scotland it's 3. Just as a default rule, Cape Byron don't bottle anything unless it's been in barrels for at least 3 years. And now it has spent the majority of its time in ex-bourbon casks and then just finished in the beer casks. No idea on what the proportion of the time is, but it's a 46% ABV. And yeah, typically just aged in their coastal tropical rainforest to get that little bit of influence from the sea. Now the color of this, although that beer is quite dark, that's not transferring over into the color of this. This is a very similar color to their ex-bourbon cask. It's got a nice golden little amber hue. There's a real buttery, kind of like a sweet buttery note. I'd almost call it, no, I'd actually call that creme brulee on the nose. A bit of vanilla. Yeah, that vanilla's really there. That's beautiful. A lot of the Cape Byron whiskies that I've had lately have been like white wine casks, you know, the Chardonnay cask, the Viognier cask. This is sort of on the nose, it's sort of coming more so like their ex-bourbon barrels, but there's like this buttery sort of influence in there that I think is coming from the beer, which I haven't gotten so much from the white wine casks. Reasonably nice legs. I don't know if you can see the color and everything there. Slange. So that sweetness and the vanilla notes, they carry across on the palate. They're almost not quite as strong as they appeared on the nose. Like it's not syrupy. I don't know if this is coming across as a little bit softer than what I'd normally expect from Cape Byron because I've just had that whopping beer. If anything, the beer almost tastes more alcoholic than the whiskey. Yeah, there's a lot of like really, almost sort of like, you know, cream-based dessert sort of flavors in there. So I mentioned creme brulee on the nose, that's coming across on the palate. It's a bit of like vanilla and custard even. Yeah, I think just honestly like not overly sweet cream-based desserts are sort of like a lot of the flavors that I'm getting in here. It's got a nice buttery sort of texture in there. A little bit of like a sort of on the tail end, there's a bit of like a citrus sort of zest, almost like a bit of a honey feel in the mouth. But the really interesting thing will be to now go back and forth between the two, get absolutely shit-faced in the process, and see how the flavors, see if they change now after having the whiskey going back to the beer. See, now having the whiskey, the sweetness of this beer is sort of pulled back a little bit, and I'm actually getting more of a wood influence, which you don't often get with beer because you often don't have beers that have been aged in barrels, but I am getting a bit of that sort of flavor coming from the barrels themselves. Wow. And you know what? This doesn't taste as alcoholic now that I've gone from 46% down to 11.9. But has this changed? So coming back to this straight off the beer, I'm actually getting, again, I'm getting more of those barrel notes because the sweetness is sort of pulled back a little bit, and I'm getting that, like that actual oak characteristic. And I'm even tasting a bit of the grain, sort of like almost like a little bit of hay sort of flavor coming through there. But honestly, having these side by side, the finish that I'm getting, like when I'm drinking each, I'm getting the flavors of the whiskey or the beer. But the finish that I'm getting on both is actually this really nice blend of the two of them kind of infused. So I think that's where like the Boilermaker makes the big difference. You know, it's bringing different flavors out of each, but you actually get this wonderfully harmonious marriage of the two flavors together on the finish. And that's what lingers around in the mouth afterwards. So that's actually, I'm quite happy I've done that experiment. And you know what, it's probably also worth mentioning too that both Cape Byron Distillery and Stone & Wood Brewery, they're both B Corp certified, which means that, you know, they put into a lot of practice and efforts to make sure that they're as environmentally low impact as possible. And when you think about it, like quite often when you get whiskey that's been aged in X something or other barrels, they're coming from all over the country to get those flavors you're after. These barrels, although they've gone like back and forth between a whiskey distillery and a beer brewery, I think it's an 11-kilometer trip. It's 11 minutes. It's like 7-kilometer drive. So really low carbon footprint to just do this marriage of the two, the whiskey and the beer. Now, I know some of the whiskies that I tend to review here are often a little bit more expensive or hard to come by. I'm trying to diversify up that range of whiskies that I'm reviewing. When it comes to the Cape Byron one though, this is actually available in Dan Murphy's. It is $150 as a retail pricing, but that's actually considered kind of low by Australian standards. There are some much lower price point Australian whiskies coming onto the market, some of which I've actually got set to review very soon, so keep an eye out for that. But this is available in Dan Murphy's, and while the Stone & Wood beer is very limited and look, it's a really nice beer, it's worth the money, but it's not cheap. But Stone & Wood has like a full selection of beer. So if you do want to do a Boilermaker with Cape Byron whiskey with a Stone & Wood beer, there's so many different beers you could choose from. Like I actually think this would go quite well with their lager or their pale ale. Give it a try. I would love to hear how it goes if you beat me to that combination before I get there. If you do have any other great Boilermaker whiskey and beer combos, please let me know. I'd also love to hear if you are from another country that does them in a different mix. I know some places in England, a Boilermaker is actually considered two different types of beer mixed together. They completely leave the whiskey out. So what's considered a Boilermaker where you're from? But regardless of what's in either of your glasses, enjoy what's in your glass and slange. I'm gonna sleep well tonight.